What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, talking today about Final Fantasy VIII, because today is actually the 20th anniversary of its launch. Yes, that's right, it has now been 2 decades since this initially was released in Japan, and we got it shortly, just a tiny bit later here in America, and already I loved this game so much. The millisecond I got to sit down and play it, I realized that this was something that was truly special. I feel like Final Fantasy VIII, a lot of times people forget that at launch, this was a very controversial title. A lot of people were basically debating which was better, Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy VIII, because this was the first time a lot of us were ever playing RPGs. I mean, I've said this in the past, but I absolutely loved FF7. It blew my mind, but part of that was that I'd never played a turn-based game ever before that. So it was one of those things where I was really being initiated to the concept of this. So going from Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy VIII, it seemed like the entire tone shifted. Personally, by far my favorite thing about Final Fantasy VIII is that it has this really heavy militaristic overtone that none of the other games in the franchise ever really messed with. I mean, if you've never played Final Fantasy VIII, it's very, very interesting that you actually are part of the army. You are literal child soldiers. I mean, one of the first main quests is trying to assassinate a world leader. I mean, to act like you're not some really heavy soldiers who have been trained since you were like this tall is a little bit of a misnomer. Now, I also think it's really cool the fact that being part of the military, there's this really heavy ambiance to so many of the activities. While you may be going to school in this giant flowery facility called a garden, it's anything but. If anything, I think that it's really, really cool that it seems like this is one of those things that it is a clever facade. It's trying to make it seem like this bright, happy place, when in actuality, these people are being trained to kill. I mean, one of the first times I ever played this game, this is a true story, I was a very little kid. My friend's brother actually was like much older, and he would basically get all the adult games, the really hardcore stuff that kids wouldn't understand. Well, we secretly stole his copy of Final Fantasy VIII one night and decided to pop the disc in, and so we're started just wandering around and trying to figure out how the combat works and how the gameplay is going to function, and we accidentally went into the training grounds and got attacked by a T-Rex. And we were just utterly decimated, but instead of discouraging us, it made us even more interested in this universe. I mean, how the heck could you have a school where students are just chilling when also there is a freaking dinosaur from Jurassic Park just wandering around? And this was after I'd played Dino Crisis, so it just made this game even more magical. Looking back on this game though, I think the thing that's probably going to be thought of the longest is the fact that the story was very, very different. This was a game that was trying to really introduce a lot of themes simultaneously. Time travel, massive loss, love over long distances. I mean, they really wanted to try and just basically give you a very, very, very adult story. The first time that many of us had heard that. I mean, before then, look, I love Final Fantasy VII absolutely with every part of my heart, but let's face it, Final Fantasy VII in many ways is a very flat story. Now, what I mean by that is everybody sort of has the same character arc. Everybody is about their own path to redemption. It's Cloud going from a ex-soldier to the hero of the universe. It's a Red 13, a lab experiment trying to figure out how much he can be human. It's Aerith trying to go from a random orphan to somebody who could be reunited with the family she never knew. Like, everybody has a similar arc of going from a bad place to a place of redemption. And I always thought that was very, very interesting. Whereas Final Fantasy VIII, everybody's story is all over the place. Some people are trying to figure out who they are. Some people are trying to basically kill their own past. Some people are literally just trying to start a giant revolution. There are resistance fighters that seem very, very real because they're conflicted. I also want to say that Final Fantasy VIII is the first game I ever saw memes of. Now, this is way before we ever had the term memes, but legitimately, there were these early file sharing sites, way back in the day where you could actually post stuff and you would click download on a specific title and it would install it on your computer. And it was a little bit random. Sometimes you'd get a cool music videos, or sometimes it'd be adult pictures of Quintus. I mean, that's kind of just what you got. But I remember seeing the first time where people were actually editing content to make a joke. I actually have such a clear memory in my head of somebody had actually edited the giant scene of the Balam Garden attack scene. So everybody's actually sword fighting and being all epic, and they'd actually edited in a bunch of sound effects from Dragon Ball Z to make it sound like Goku was trying to fight off an entire army by himself. And that sounds like such a small, simple thing, but it was really the first yet to come. It was the first game that really came about during the internet era. I mean, coming out in 1999, that is a long time ago, but it was the initial steps towards a internet being accessible beyond just really slow modems. Some people at this point even had really fast internet. High-speed internet was available for the first time, so people were trying to discuss this game and dig into this game. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about the difficulty of this, because I do think that Final Fantasy VIII is a little bit harder than the others, mostly because you actually have to find all sorts of hidden items. Upgrading your gear is a very convoluted mess. And also, I always thought it was interesting that they just put so much of the combat was based on the equip system, because you could actually equip not just your weapons and armor, but also magic. Using the junction system, you could actually put, like, say you're in an ice area, you could actually put ice on your armor, so you'd absorb all ice spells, and simultaneously put fire magic on your sword, so every single hit did like 10 times the damage. And for that reason, I have a very controversial opinion when it comes to RPGs, which is that some RPGs are better with a strategy guide. I think that some of the Star Oceans are better with a strategy guide. Some stuff like Chrono Cross, certainly better with a strategy guide, because there's just so much going on. Whereas Final Fantasy VIII, even though I do own the strategy guide, I think that this is a very spectacular game at making you encouraged to just be lost, to experiment, because it makes it where when you start to figure things out on your own, it is very much this mental awakening when you realize, oh, there is so many options on how to play. This is not just an A to B adventure. I mean, true, Squall has an overall goal to stop Ultimecia and save the universe, but beyond that, there's a lot of different picking of paths, figuring out how you want to try and handle this. It's for that reason I've always thought that Final Fantasy VIII actually aged very, very well. Okay, yes, there's a lot of jokes about how the graphics have aged very, very poorly, but I think the story itself really does stand the test of time. A lot of these themes, a lot of these systems built into the combat, they're things that still manage to challenge you even today. I do think that it's one of those things where you very willingly have to avoid the internet, though. I guess that's one of the number one reasons I really wish this would come to Nintendo Switch, the Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4 is that I feel like, A, there is still a huge freaking fan base for Final Fantasy VIII, and B, it's hard to ignore the fact that a lot of people would be picking it up for the first time and be completely challenged by it. They would be blown away that there could be a Final Fantasy that tests you not just to grind, but actually to think about different boss fights. I mean, I still have so many good memories with this. The first time I heard Eyes on Me and thought of this real actual song within a game that I wanted to hum along to, or so many great things like when you get the airship at the end of the game, I would actually use it to chase the trains around because there are all these trains that will drive across in the overworld, and I always thought it was so cool to just basically get on my airship and boost along behind them. It felt like this world was actually real. I still remember as a kid, I was actually really afraid of hurting the discs because it really felt like each one of these discs was an actual planet, a real part of the Final Fantasy universe. And it was one of those things where I respected the characters in a way. I wanted to make sure that they were safe because I wanted to save them. Now, not literally. I understood that this was a video game. I wasn't like hallucinating, but still, I'm still so in love with this. I wish it would come back, but even still, I'm just thrilled to get to celebrate the 20th anniversary. This has been a great time, and it's one of those things that I can look back so freaking fondly. Yes, this game was overshadowed a little bit by the fact that they released Final Fantasy IX just 1 year later, but even still, this is a game that is truly for the ages. But what do you think of it? Have you actually played Final Fantasy VIII, and did you find it a little bit overwhelming? What age were you when you first gave it a shot? Because me, I think I was probably 12 or 13, maybe even 11, and at the time, it was like the future of gaming in my hands. So tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Man, I'm so glad I actually still have my PlayStation hooked up. I actually have one of those HDMI PlayStations. I'm going to go play this today. I'm not doing anything else. I need to pack for a trip, but let's go on an adventure. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.